Hi, welcome to the video on wisdom literature, specifically on Proverbs. Um, this particular video is basically the last video that you will have on the Old Testament. There are many different books that are included in wisdom literature, including um, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. And there's an actual other section of literature called apocalyptic literature, which has to do with the end of the world and consists of some of the later books of the Old Testament, like Daniel. But I'm not going to go over that just because we are limited in time, and there's so much information in this class already for the 5 weeks, where each of the 5 weeks equals 2.5 weeks of information. So I just didn't want to overload you. So I will do a little discussion about wisdom literature and then go over Proverbs, hopefully on this particular video. Okay, so in terms of wisdom literature, um, like I said, wisdom literature and apocalyptic literature are the last types of literature that get included in the Old Testament. We had already gone over the patriarchal narratives. We had gone over the covenantal law stuff. We had gone over the Exodus material, and then the Deuteronomistic history from Joshua to Second Kings, and then went over a couple of selections of prophets. The next thing, time-wise, that gets included into the canon of the Old Testament is wisdom literature. So let me go over a little bit about that. Now, wisdom literature is very different in terms of the style and worldview from the rest of the material in the Old Testament. First of all, God is barely mentioned, frankly, in this material. Oh, I actually didn't also go over any of the kind of lady books, which were Ruth and Esther, and some of the apocryphal books like Susanna, because we just, frankly, just don't have enough time. It's unfortunate because those are excellent stories, but they're mostly stories, as opposed to tying into the theology of the Old Testament. Anyway, much like those books, Ruth and Esther, which really have no figure of God in there, that's what wisdom literature is similar to. It's really a reflection about how the knowledge of God sets you on the path to righteousness. The more you know, the more you understand your relationship with God. If you remain foolish and ignorant, then you are unknowing about the ways that you can properly behave in a moral and just society. I can't think of a more timely statement. If you see what's happening in the world today, it truly is better for you to have knowledge about the world around you, because that makes you a greater caretaker of the world around you. So, um, in terms of Proverbs, it's a massive collection of sayings and poems and, iterations about how knowledge of God basically makes you closer to God. We're just going to go look at the chapters 1 through 8, but this is just kind of a description of what types of proverbial material or wisdom literature are in there. Proverbs contains both practical and theoretical wisdom. So, spare the rod, spoil the child. There's some practical things that you can do that will make your life easier and more wise. And then there's some others about just when they say theoretical or speculative, it's like, shouldn't you do these things? Wouldn't these things make you a more knowledgeable person about God? So some proverbs tied to belief in God as the power that rewards good behavior and punishes evil deeds. To have knowledge of God truly is a good thing versus an evil thing. Ignorance is evil. Knowledge is good. So it presents wisdom in practical terms, assuming God will punish evil and reward good. Righteous poverty is better than wicked wealth. Knowledge of God is better than ignorance of God, especially deliberate ignorance of God. In terms of the wisdom movement in Israel in the ancient Near East, in general, there were 3 professions where you were literate. Okay, like you were knowledgeable and literate, and contributed to the theological shaping of the people of Israel. Priests, who were in charge of the actual text. Prophets, who spoke messages from the Lord, and then sages. This is the wisdom category that gave advice So these are the ones that are not necessarily like in your face, actively shaping your understanding of God, but ones that kind of that react to the situation, saying, okay, this is really the thing to do in this particular situation. But so they're not overt actors, but wisdom sages were the ones that provided good, solid foundational knowledge for understanding God. Where would these wisdom sages teach? Maybe through their family line, oftentimes to the court of the king. They would have sages or wisdom, people teaching wisdom in the court. And then, of course, schools. You would be teaching knowledge about God in schools. And Ecclesiastes most likely came from this setting because of the style of his book. So Israelite wisdom is unique because it actually links together wisdom, knowledge of God, and living simply. Don't complicate your lives, because complications and material goods and all of these other things distract you from understanding and study. So really, studying and learning and praying about God is really the key to being a righteous person, as opposed to distracting yourself with ignorance and frivolity and things that really don't mean anything ultimately in terms of your understanding of God. Israelite wisdom is really part of a much wider movement. So it's there a lot of the language and proverbs and things that come out of not only Proverbs and Job and Ecclesiastes also can be found in Mesopotamian wisdom literature, in Egyptian wisdom literature. In fact, Egypt has a lot of this, So it's really difficult to understand who wrote this stuff, because a lot of wisdom literature is a collection of sayings and proverbs and stories and things like that that have a lot of commonality in their neighboring wisdom literature corpuses. So unlike J, E, D, and P, where you can identify them and where they appear in the Bible, wisdom literature really has none of J, E, D, and P. They're kind of unique in and of itself. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at Proverbs. So in the prologue, Solomon had been attributed wisdom, like that was kind of his characteristic, even though ultimately he was not very wise because he kind of overextended his country. But Proverbs begins with the idea that Solomon is the author, when we know that he really wasn't. So for learning about wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, gaining in instruction in wise dealing, righteousness, justice, and equity, this is the purpose of the book. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and fools despise wisdom and instruction. So tied along with the idea of accumulating knowledge of God leads to righteousness is, don't distract yourself with stupid things. That's it. Knowledge of God requires, studying and actually living simply and piously and with dedication towards the accumulation of knowledge. So anything that drags you away from that is going to be considered what's called folly, not wisdom. Okay, so the first thing is like, hey, don't hang out with people that are foolish or evil, right? Do not walk in their ways. Keep your foot from their paths, for their feet run to evil and they hurry to shed blood. So basically, stick with people who are not like this, right? Let us wantonly ambush the innocent. Those are not the people you want to be hanging out with. Now, the introduction of the figure called Dame Wisdom comes in here. Who is this woman named Wisdom? And in Proverbs 1 through 8, just like Hauer says in the book, wisdom is personified as a woman. She's called Dame Wisdom, and then her opposite is called Dame Folly. Like, don't follow the foolish woman, follow the wise woman. When she cries out on the street and raises her voice and cries out, how long, simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? Give heed to my reproof. So she's personified as literally a woman saying, come on, get a little smarter. How long are you going to be so dumb? How long will it be that you don't crack open a book? Get off your phone, Get to some knowledge of God. Open your eyes and actually understand what it means to live with God, you know? So, so she says, she's basically calling out, I will pour out my thoughts to you. I'll make my words known to you. And then she says, they will call upon me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. So really, seeking knowledge equals seeking God for her, right? She says, my child, if you accept my words and treasure up my commandments within you, making your ear attentive to wisdom, inclining your heart to understanding, then that's going to be great. The Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk blamelessly. So then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity, every good path, for wisdom will come into your heart. Open up yourself to God and the knowledge of God, and then you will walk blamelessly. See? So you will become a better person with an increased knowledge of God. It will save you from the way of evil, from those who speak perversely, who forsake the paths of uprightness. And we know a lot of people like that, in today's day and age. Who are those who speak perversely, right? Who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perverseness of evil. If you seek knowledge, if you just open up a book, if you read, if you open your ears to a variety of opinions, if you use your brain to judge as to what is legitimate information and facts versus what is just hearsay, your mind will be open to God. You will understand righteousness and justice, right? Now, the loose woman who's the adulteress with her smooth words is Dame Folly, okay? That person who forsakes the partner of youth, ignore her. Ignore Dame Folly and only walk in the way of the good, okay? So here she is saying, listen, the reason why I am legitimate in terms of my instruction as Dame Wisdom is because I was there. I was actually there. When God created the world, when God set into order this wonderful creation, I was there. So she says, here's some parental advice, by the way, more admonition to keep to the right path. Don't do impurity and infidelity. Here's some more practical ones. Let's see. Oh, not the falseness of adultery, right? And then here, the gifts of wisdom. Don't I call, and does not understanding raise her voice? I call to you, and my cry is to all that I live. I, wisdom, live with prudence. I attain knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is the hatred of evil. By me kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By this woman, this wisdom woman, rulers rule, and nobles all who govern rightly. I love those who love me. She's almost speaking as if she is God, except she is Dame Wisdom. And she says here, the legitimacy of why I can say these things is because the Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts a long time ago. Ages ago I was set up. Knowledge of God was set up at the beginning. Wisdom was set up at the beginning. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle in the face of the deep, I was there. So why do I get to say this as Dame Wisdom? Why do I get to tell you and instruct you and shape you and introduce you to the knowledge of God? Because I was there with God. That's kind of an exciting depiction or personification of wisdom, that God was hand in hand with knowledge herself at the beginning of creation, and that makes her a legitimate spokesperson for God, for knowledge of God, for understanding of God. Because with knowledge of God, with wisdom, you get closer to God and further away from ignorance, folly, corruption, sin, because you have the wherewithal and the gifts to perceive what is right and wrong. Isn't that wonderful? I'll see you in the New Testament coming up.